Tôi cần học tiếng Việt.
She tried to speak again.
Oh, by the way, I'll remind you again. To turn the screen off, hit this button. Hit that, try it. And then hit again.
Mà thường anh sẽ bút á. Mà anh nghĩ là nó ok, không cần đổi hả? No need to change.
No, because we use it as a regular mirror.
So let's be confirmed to them.
Well, no.
Or we use the later one, we see how.
No. It'd be good if you can change it, but it's not urgent.
Okay.
Because
all those in the crowd prepared to kill. And then the pain returned.
Oh, I think next week. Next week we'll bring to them for they checking about this.
Who? Binfest?
No.
Shopee?
No. Yeah, Shopee.
Okay, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
But that knowledge does nothing to know. Court winked away heavily, stared down this half-consumed glass of cocaine single malt whiskey.
Ngày hôm nay sẽ là hôm nay có một
The booze was a bad.
Vâng.
There was no question, but he'd been making a lot of poor decisions recently. The pain far from controlled him these days, and sometimes he got powerless. He shook his head now to clear his way, then spoke softly.
That part's loud. Yeah.
Kiểu người ta không có khe luôn hả?
No, they don't hear it. It's not they don't hear it. They don't hear it, or they don't.
Because silent, right?
Yeah.
You mean silent?
Seatbelts.
Oh.
So anytime your the brother hears it, it's seatbelt.
Yeah.
We assess with high confidence that Zakharova was executed in Moscow on June 19th at 6:50
Chưa quen lắm.
The cause of death is hidden. Court took another slow sip of his whiskey now. His eyes closed, his head bowed, and his heart so unbelievably heavy. Eventually, the whispered maxim came again. She is not dead. He had to say the words, whether there was any evidence to believe them or not, because he had to convince himself that there was a reason for what was about to happen. Some achievable objective, and just on the other side of all he was about to put himself through. The woman was the goal, the only goal, and the woman simply had to be alive for any of this bullshit to make sense. With fresh determination, he pushed the despair out of his consciousness, if only for the moment. The stab of agony in his brain lessened, his body tightened, and his muscles flexed, readying for action. Court blinked fresh mist from his eyes, flashed another glance up to the mirror, and got down to work, ranking the threats in the room according to who seemed the most switched on, who seemed the most capable, the most motivated, the most lethal. His powers of perception on such matters had been honed by 2 decades of college away, so he made his assessments quickly and coolly. He'd already identified 5 enemy in the room, and in order of importance, 1 and 2 were definitely the pair sitting in the booth over his left shoulder. They'd been looking his way through the crowd, but casually. One had been on his phone, twice, likely either reporting to someone or receiving instructions. They had guns on their hips that bulged their coats, and to the trained asset, the men's eyes were the eyes of stone-cold killers. But they seemed relatively relaxed, kind of like they did this shit all the time. Court took in their demeanor, stored it as data in his tactical brain, and adjusted his plan accordingly. Number 3 on the threat list sat down the bar, 3 patrons to Court's right. The man, early 30s with bushy eyebrows and narrow eyes, had been staring at the asset in the mirror, unable to mask his interest and his ire. He looked straight up pissed off, an unprofessional trait in a gunman, which made him somewhat less intimidating than the cool pros in the booth behind. 4 and 5 on Court's threat matrix stood by the door. They were older, in their 40s, They held beers in their hands and pretended to watch a soccer game on the TV between Dinamo Bucuresti and FC Voluntari. But the American caught them glancing away right at the moment the Bucharest striker slipped behind the enemy defense, received a perfectly placed chip from the right midfielder, and half-volleyed a go-ahead goal. Even though the match was a repeat, it was a strange time to turn from the screen, and stranger still that the pair used the opportunity to both scan the bar where Court sat, and to look over at the two men in the booth for guidance, solidifying the hierarchy of this team of gunmen in Court's mind. The pair by the door were both strapped. One man had a swell under his blue down jacket at the appendix, big enough to be a full-sized double-stack semi-automatic pistol. The other, a bald guy in a brown leather coat, had adjusted his outerwear on his left side of the hip a couple of times, an unconscious grooming cue, an indicator that there was something positioned there that he wanted to be sure remained ready for easy access. It would be a gun, of course, and number 5 either was a lefty or had a cross-draw holster. Cross-draw was stupid. It would mean the man was a rank amateur, because it took longer to reach across the body and pull a weapon. But if he was a lefty, the gun would be right where it needed to be for quick access. After another scan of the mirror, Court felt satisfied he had completed his first task of the evening. There were 36 people in this room, the staff included, and he had pegged these 5 as his opposition. And all 5 of them knew that he was a threat as well, which meant his elbow would be closing on him very shortly. He figured the pair in the booth planned on making the approach, shoving a gun in his ribs and giving an order of some sort to force him outside. Then they'd do it right up there on the street, because the street out the front door of this shithole had no doubt seen its share of murder. They'd use guns for the coercion phase of their plan, but blades for the actual killing, to keep the noise down, Court assumed. Or would they? He looked at the men in the booth again. They appeared incredibly self-confident. They might just intend to drag him outside, shoot him in the skull, and then stroll calmly to their car. Regardless of the enemy's plan, however, Court was sure of one thing. None of it was going to happen. No. He saw this all going down a different way, because unbeknownst to any of them, the American at the bar had the true advantage. Court's advantage, simply put, was that he did not care. Did not care who lived or died, who witnessed the
Did you ask the VinFast dealer about the 3.5 kilowatt charger? Did you ask him? Ask him if they carry it.
Yeah.
He would not be going outside. No. He'd start the fight right here, smack dab in the middle of everything.
3.5, right?
It was
3.5 kilowatt.
But the edge Gentry held over his enemies was that none of them would expect him to draw right here in the middle of a crowd.
76.
He'd have his gun
He's
up
a
and
number
rocking
player
before
of my
these assholes
hometown.
even knew they were in a fight for their lives.
86.
He took another drink and then began gauging the demeanor of the rest of the patrons. He'd been in 1,000 bars like this, all male clientele, a strong criminal element. And a lot of times, some tightly wound asshole who'd come in for a drink would insert himself in the middle of somebody else's altercation. Just for giggles. There were 8 or so men in here who looked like they might be the type to force themselves into a dispute they had no part of. But Court doubted they would remain involved once guns began to bark and blood began to jet out of ragged wounds. If they did stay involved, then they'd die. This he told himself with neither distress nor disquiet, as his gaze returned to the wood grain of the bar. There would be the looky-loos as well, those who would egg on the fighters while staying clear themselves. But they weren't worried, unless and until they whipped out camera phones. Court imagined that he'd have to hold the whole room at gunpoint once the smoke cleared, confiscate several grand worth of cell phones, and then destroy them. But that was a problem for after, and he needed to remain focused on the now. He'd scanned the room for security cams and ID'd 3. There was no front angle on him where he sat here, but that would change once the shooting began. Nothing he could do about that, so he kept his knit cap low, his neck deep in his shoulders, and his eyes down as much as possible, even when glancing in the mirror. When it was all over, he'd have to go to the office and confiscate the old security system's hard drive. But again, that was after, and now was now. He began to look at his watch, but before he did, the bartender caught his eye. The man was past 60, heavy-set, with a thick beard and mustache, unfriendly from the moment Court came through the door. He didn't seem like he had any relationship with the 5 armed dudes milling about, but he certainly could pose a problem nevertheless. A bartender in an establishment this rough, in a neighborhood this seedy, would of course have a weapon stashed, and Court would have to account for the possibility that the man fancied himself some kind of hero. There would be no heroes in this bar tonight. Court would see to that, even if it meant shooting this fucker, along with whoever else sought a brief moment of glory. Finally, when he had taken in all the information that he could from his opponents and his surroundings, he glanced at the cheap Casio watch on his wrist. 30 seconds to midnight. He wiped his eyes with the back of his arm, then rolled his neck left and right, cracking an upper cervical vertebra with a satisfying thump and a jolt of electricity down an arm. Behind him, the 2 men in the booth slid out, stood, and squared up in his direction. His first and second priorities out of the 5 hard men in the room began advancing through the tables and the non-combatants. They were coming to him, and he found their timing positively synchronistic. He downed the dregs of his scotch, blew out a long, low breath, and, at the first clang of a church bell somewhere off in the night, pushed himself back from the bar. To himself, only to himself, Cortland gently muttered 3 words. Softly, solemnly, he said, "She's not dead." He reached to his waist and spun around, his coat flailing with the movement. A suppressed subcompact pistol appeared in his hand and swung towards the room full of men. 1. The ringing of the midnight church bells cued the 4 men standing on the rooftop that the killing had begun. They moved towards the edge of the roof of the parking garage, 4 stories above the street, leaving their Audi behind and advancing through a row of parked cars and vans so they could get a better view of the action that should now be underway just a few blocks to the north. They'd expected gunshots, explosions, something. But after the 12th low chime from the church next door, they all peered into the darkness, and they heard nothing, save for the sounds of the street. The men waited in silence for a moment more, and then Vartan, only 22 years old, spoke in Romanian. "Something's wrong. Let's shoot somebody." Yosef sniffed. He was 30 and muscular, with a trim beard that rimmed his jawline, and no mustache. He answered back in Romanian. "What more? It's just one guy." "Yeah, against 4, 5 enemy, all armed, and one guy on off. That dude is a killing machine. You know he smoked 6 men
Take a
down in
picture for him.
Sofia." "I heard 4, Aline retorted from Vartan's other side. He was nearly 40, tall and overweight, but strongly built. A thick red beard grew from his round face. Vartan shook his head. "It was 6. The last 2 with his bare hands." A 4th man, a small 48-year-old named Avram, chimed in now. "I talked to a Bulgarian cop I know. He read the police report. The killings happened down in Varna, the coast. 3 victims, 2 bodyguards, and the main target, an underboss of the QF crime family." Vartan leaned back against the grill of a tan Renault van in the middle of the row of 6 parked vehicles here on the edge of the rooftop lot.
Huh?
"I heard it was in Sofia, and I heard it was 6. All 4 of the Romanians
You get my messages
thought
about the
other
dogs?
3 to be full of shit, and soon the silence returned as they
You get
concentrated
my messages
again,
about the dogs?
listening for the sounds of violence. When it came,
You didn't? I sent
it
them
was
last night.
disappointing. A single crack of a gunshot
Maybe
snapped
later,
somewhere behind them, maybe half a kilometer away. But no one turned towards this noise. Gunfire wasn't anything special around here, and a shot from the south had nothing to do with them. The Ferentari district of Bucharest had once been ranked the 4th most dangerous place to visit on Earth, and that was back before it really went to shit. The streets at this time of night were full of addicts, dealers, pimps, prostitutes, and gangsters. There was no legit reason to move through Ferentari after dark. The dealers, pimps, and prostitutes working the district were wisely frightened, though the addicts were blissfully unaware of the threats. But it was the gangsters who both knew what lurked in the shadows and remained unafraid, and the 4 on the rooftop belonged to this class. They were Balan Brigazi, Romanian mob, and as dangerous as this district was after nightfall, the 4 knew that no one around here would bother them. They carried handguns inside their leather jackets,
Okay.
and Vartan, the youngest, also kept a tiny MP5K submachine gun hanging from a cable under his arm, and extra magazines in his coat pocket.
Yeah, well,
But it wasn't the guns that
he has
protected
dogs?
them. No, it was the Brotherhood of the Brigazzi, because their credo was the same as that of most mafia
This is like a
groups around
Vietnamese
the
shelter
world.
thing.
Fuck
You
with
can go.
one,
You
and
have to go through all the
fuck with
pictures. That's
and
the same dog.
nobody is going to fuck with all of
Yeah, there's like 5 or 6 dogs like you.
Light snow drifted through the hazy glow
Some are
of halogen
puppies,
lamps
some are like
positioned on a higher building next to where they stood on the roof of the parking garage, and the men stomped their feet and kept their heads tucked down in the collars of their coats as they continued to look into the night, their ears tuned to listen for the sounds of mayhem that must surely be playing out just a couple hundred meters away. The pulsing late-night street noise below them continued, but that was it. At 12:05 a.m., headlights appeared up there on the rooftop, circling up the ramp to the parking lot, and then a black Mercedes gave up, followed by a dark gray BMW, rolled in the direction of the men standing by the row of cars. Vartan, the young one, turned to Yosef, the muscular one, and said a single word. Nashua.
I don't know, some are puppies, you don't know how big they're going to be.
Kakat. In Romanian, Nashul means the Godfather, and Kakat means oh shit. The gay wagon parked along the row of vehicles in the lot. The gray 7 Series pulled up alongside the 4 men, and its black window rolled down. A man older than any of the others sat there. The light was low up here, but still glinted off his glasses and his watch. Doreen Balan was 66, small and wiry. He looked just like an older version of the petty street thief he'd once been. Only the Rolex on his wrist, the chains on his neck over his coat, and his Maybach eyeglasses indicated that his stature around here had changed over the past 50 years. He addressed Avram, the leader of the 4. I wanted to come see for myself. Avram said. Of course, sir. We expect news at any moment. Balan looked around now. This is a strange place to meet. The asset picked this rally point. The street's quiet below. I guess he thought we'd have a view from up here, but we haven't seen anything yet. The Godfather nodded, then climbed out of the vehicle and lit a cigarette, while his men piled out of the gay wagon and the front seat of the BMW. Doreen Balan had been a thief in Constanza, on the Black Sea coast, a couple hundred clicks east of Bucharest. He graduated to bigger scores, then collectivized the local crooks, starting a gang that eventually controlled smuggling at the port. Cigarettes and booze, knockoff designer jeans, even cars. And then he moved to Bucharest. And here, he graduated to human being.
Fuck.
Balan trafficked prostitutes to 15 European nations. His girls were Romanians, Bulgarians, and Serbs. But he also acquired human capital from Russia, just across the Black Sea. Sex trafficking had become less lucrative since the war in Ukraine began, but Balan saw the conflict as an opportunity. He reversed the flow of his contraband and began sending luxury items into Russia for a massive markup. Sanctions on Western goods had hurt the rich in Russia. Local perfumes from Minsk or Volgograd weren't as prized as Chanel from Paris. So Balan had thieves across the continent acquire truckloads of perfume, watches, fine cheeses, furs, and other items, and he arranged transport across the Black Sea to a partner organization in the Russian port of Sochi. This had made the Balan Brigazzi millions of euros in the past couple of years, but all that was in jeopardy now, because although Doreen Balan was the most dangerous Romanian mafia boss in Bucharest, he was not the most dangerous mafia boss in Bucharest. Not since the Italians moved in. The Andromeda, the Calabrian mob, had taken up residence in the Romanian capital, and were now organizing their own smuggling shipments into Russia from the riverine port of Medjugorje. They sailed their boats along the Danube Black Sea Canal, and then across the water to Sochi. The Italians had killed Russians who worked with Balan. They had depressed the price for luxury goods by introducing competition, something no mafia capo has any interest in. And now the Calabrians were threatening Balan's operation here in the capital city. Roughing up his thieves, stealing his trucks and containers, even kidnapping the daughter of a Brigazi underboss. The Calabrian capo was ensconced in a safe house here in Ferentari, protected by 10 of the organization's toughest soldiers. He was tasked with taking over the underworld of the city, and Balan knew it would just be a matter of time before the Italian began ordering the killing of Balan's men and dismantling of Balan's network. The foreign mafia had to go, but the Romanian hadn't survived in this dangerous world for this long by being anything other than a pragmatist. He knew that his own enforcers were no match for the Ndrangheta's well-trained goons, and that was where the American came in, to thin the herd.
It's a lot of traffic.
Balan had heard of an incident in Bulgaria 5 weeks earlier. A lone man had entered a nightclub in the posh Chaika neighborhood in the coastal city of Varna to talk to a Bulgarian mafia underboss, and apparently the conversation had not gone well. When the dust settled and the smoke cleared, the underboss was dead, as was one of his bodyguards, and 2 more of his men had been horribly injured, disfigured for life. The next day, Balan got a call from an American saying he was responsible for the mayhem in Varna, and he wanted to work out an exchange of services. He would do a job for the Balan Brigazi if the Balan Brigazi gave him something in return. And what he wanted in return was not money. Balan tried to vet the man, but he was a ghost, even to contacts he kept in the Romanian intelligence services. So instead of a direct hire, Balan told the American he had to audition for the job first. 36 hours later, a semi-truck carrying a load of explosives to be shipped into Russia was left in front of Balan's HQ in Bucharest's Pipera district. The Italians had stolen the ordnance from the Romanian military, and then, somehow, the Americans stole it from them. Balan's boys had found the cab of the truck soaked in blood, evidence of arterial spray. The American was clearly skilled, but he was also clearly crazy. The copious amount of blood from a couple of low-level thieves in the cab of the truck was an obvious tell. This assassin, whoever he was, murdered with a unique rage. The truck was loaded 90% to the roof, over 1,400 kilos of Semtex plastic explosives from the aptly named Czech firm, Explosia. Along with the satchels of ordnance were triggers and detonators, enough bang to blow up a city block in Ukraine if the Russians so desired. Balan didn't normally deal with weaponry, but he knew the Russians would pay up big for this score. But more important for the Romanian gangster than making some money off the product, Balan had found his champion, the asset that he needed to rid him of the Italians, once and for all. Balan messaged the American and told him the truck of goods was a very fine start, but what Balan really needed was for a group of thugs from Italy to die. The 2 men agreed upon the terms. In exchange for the American's single demand, he would go to the bar the Italians frequented in their off hours, kill whatever Ndrangheta men were present, and leave no trace that Doreen Balan had ever been involved. That was the extent of their arrangement, but Balan envisioned one more step to the affair. If the American asset made it back alive to his rally point, then Balan would demand that the American do one more job before he fulfilled his end of the bargain. If the American said yes, Balan would send him after the Italian capo himself. And if he said no, then Avram and the others would riddle him with bullets right here, to make doubly certain there were no comebacks. The Romanian godfather was a pragmatist, after all. After another drag from his cigarette, Balan said, "Where is Christopher?" Avram said, "He's in a van."
Well, that's nonverbal communication. You gotta wait for someone to let you make you space. So you gotta watch your mirror and see if there's space developed.
Yeah.
The old man looked down to his Rolex. "It's 6 after. Check back in with him." "Yes, sir." Avram pulled his phone and hit a button. He waited, and the men around him waited as well. But he got no answer. With a nervous look to his boss, he then turned to Yossi. "Take Vartan and Ali. Just go to the van, not the bar. Understood?" Before he could reply, Doreen Balan shook his head. "No. You boys all stay here with me, in case the asset shows." He turned to the 6 men who'd arrived with him in the 2 vehicles. "Everybody who came with me will go. Get Christopher out of there. Whatever the situation, quickly he added, and stay away from the Italians. 6 of the 11 men on the rooftop raced off in the Mercedes and the BMW. Alon and the 4 men who'd been waiting here for the past hour remained. The snow began to pick up a little. Just a couple of minutes later, a new set of headlights appeared from the ramp on the opposite side of the rooftop lot, just to the right of the small concrete structure built around the stairwell. Pistoale, Alon said softly, and all the men pulled their pistols except for Vartan, who scooped up his MP5K from under his arm and brought it to his shoulder. But then the vehicle came into view under the lampposts as it passed the door to the stairs, and everyone recognized Christopher's Ford Transit van. Pistols were reholstered, but Alon was not eased. Vartan, find cover in case this is a setup by the Italians. Vartan hurried to the front of the Renault van that had been there when the men arrived, took a knee, and peered out the side towards the south with the wire stock of his gun in the crook of his shoulder, watching the Ford as it slowed in front of the others. Alon himself walked up to the van and found Christopher behind the wheel, checking the interior quickly to make certain his man was alone. He said, "Why didn't you answer your phone?" Christopher was 28, smarter than the other goons, and Darlene Milan's nephew. I took the asset where he told me, a couple of blocks away from the bar. He had me call in to Avram to say he'd begin his attack at midnight. As soon as I hung up the phone, the American had a gun in my face. He wanted my mobile. I had to give it to him. He seemed to know I had a backup. I had to give him that too. He told me to wait for him, and I did, but what? But Christopher got out of the van. The older man could see his hands shaking. He put his hand on the vehicle to steady himself, and he just stared at the ground in front of him. The Nashul said, "Keep talking, damn you. What's going on?" I could hear it. It was a bloodbath. We heard nothing. He had a silencer, maybe subsonic ammunition. Just soft pops, broken glass, shouting, screaming, crying out. The panic of men. Nonsense. The Italians would have shot back. Surely they don't have silencers on all their guns. I don't think they even had time to pull their guns. It happened so fast. 3-4 seconds of shooting. Soon people began running for their lives up the street, right past my van. Then the American. Where is he? For the first time, the young man's eyes fixed on his uncle. I didn't see what happened to him. When the fighting was over, he did not come back. I waited 5 minutes, then assumed he was killed. A knife or something? Or maybe the Italians did have silencers. I don't know. I wanted to get out of there before the police showed up. Milan waved a hand towards Vartan, kneeling down behind the Renault, and the young man rose, stepped out, and lowered his machine pistol. The Nashul turned to Avram now. Call the others back. We'll all leave here together. The Italian capo and his night crew of bodyguards are still in town, and even if they can't be sure we were involved, we need to be damn careful that we... The creaking of the metal door to the stairwell shaft across the parking lot interrupted the older man, and he turned to the sound. Pistoale, he ordered again as he looked across the space. Guns came up, aimed in at the door just 20 meters away as it opened. A lone figure stood there, silhouetted by the stairwell lighting behind him. His hands appeared empty. They hung down by his side. He wore a black coat, a backpack, a knit cap, and a beard. But no one could make out his face. A shadow in human form. Snow swirled in the silence. Finally, the new arrival spoke in English. His voice sounded relaxed, lackadaisical even. What's up? Balan looked at the others, then back to the man he presumed to be his American asset. In English, he asked, What happened? The figure shrugged. 5 of them, no collateral to speak of, but the bartender's going to need somebody to wipe his ass for a while. The Romanian crime boss stared back in confusion. He didn't really understand what the man was talking about, other than the fact that he'd encountered 5 Italians in the bar. You eliminated them? Yes. Balan nodded. And you survived? The American sniffed. His voice remained cool. Is that a question? Alon stood dumbfounded for a moment, then asked, "How did it happen?" "I went to the bar earlier in the afternoon. Paid a worker there to tell me when the Calabrians would come in. I was overheard, intentionally. I got followed out by an Italian. And I kicked his ass. Told him I'd be back tonight for his buddies." Alon took a couple of steps forward. "You wanted them to know you were a threat." The American remained where he was in the stairwell, as if he knew the light behind him would shield the men's view of his face. "It was a matter of figuring out who was who. But how did you kill them without any of them firing back at you?" With a shrug, he said, "Swift and judicious marksmanship." Milan looked to his four men behind him by the vehicles, then back to the American. "Then you, sir, are an artist with a gun. Whoever you are, you certainly do impress." "I've done what you asked. Now it's time for you to do what you promised." Behind the Nashville, Avram translated for Aline and Vartan, neither of whom spoke English. But Yosef and Christopher understood the language well, and they looked to their boss, wondering how he would respond. Alon lit a fresh cigarette, took a long drag. He was uneased by the crazy American, but still, he felt like he was in complete control of this situation. "You asked me to take you to Constanza, to the port. You asked me to put you on a Turkish vessel that is going across the Black Sea tomorrow night, to the port of Sochi. You, unlike every rational person on this earth, want to go into Russia." The American said nothing. The Romanian chuckled a little. "It seems a waste to me. I mean, for me to send you to your death, now that I know what skill you bring to the table." The American shifted on his legs. "And yet we had an agreement. So, Milan smiled again. "So why don't you stay for a while? We will put you on the next Turkish ship. It will call in Constanza in 4 days' time. That will give you the opportunity to do one more job for me." The American did not speak immediately. After a few seconds, however, he said, "I don't have 4 days. You were down in Bulgaria for weeks trying to arrange crossing from another outfit. Don't tell me you don't have 4 more days." To Doreen Balan's surprise, the American's voice cracked a little when he responded, a sudden show of emotion. I really don't. I have to go now."
Now,
2. "Tell me then, what is so important in Russia that an American wants to go there alone?" Court Gentry was barely listening to the man, and he sure as hell wasn't going to tell him his business. Instead, alarm bells went off inside him, and his eyes darted back and forth. Court had always known he might be walking into a double cross tonight, so he scanned the roof of this parking garage, left and right. He surveyed the buildings around him, lower to the north on his left, higher to the south on his right. He evaluated the 5 men in front of him. They were better illuminated under the light poles that ringed the lot than Court was here in the doorway, with the glow of the stairwell behind him. The Godfather was well out in front of his crew. He might have been armed. His coat was too bulky to tell. The men behind him seemed relaxed, but ready to act, as if they thought they were in charge of everything that was happening here. Maybe they were, Court allowed. As he had done to the Italians, he judged the skill and the fervor of the Romanian soldiers. The muscular man with the pistol jutting out of his waistband above his crotch had been around the block. The burly guy didn't speak English and was listening to another dude translate for him, but he carried himself with authority. The young guy with the machine pistol looked curious and switched on, but unafraid. Another young man, the kid who drove him to the bar, held his pistol with a jittering hand. The fifth guy, smaller and older than anyone other than Balan himself, appeared to be second in command. He looked at Court, or at Court's silhouette, with a mix of wonderment and suspicion. The fact that a man had waltzed onto this guy's turf and taken out half his competition in one fell swoop seemed to utterly fascinate him. But he didn't seem like he had any plans to do more than the call. Before Court spoke again, he gleaned one more thing from the group in front of him. They might be about to threaten him. They might even be about to kill him if he turned to walk away. But none of them looked like they were about to jump in a car and drive him to the coast. To Balan, he said, "You never had a plan to get me on that ship, did you?" With a smile, the 66-year-old replied, "Not that ship. The next one, certainly. As I said, I have just one more job for you." Court shook his head, said, "After Russia. After Russia, I'll come back and I'll do whatever you... There will be no after Russia. Whatever you have planned there, you will die in the process. I know that, and you must know that as well." In the distance came the sound of sirens. The police were finally nearing the bar where 5 foreigners had just been murdered in cold blood. A 15-minute police response time to a quintuple homicide in Ferentari sounded about right to Gore. He said, "My answer is no. So, now it's your move. You can be an honorable man. You can fulfill your end of our agreement. Or our business here is done." Milan tossed his cigarette. "Our business is not done, friend. You are not free to go." From a signal off the man next to Milan, all of the Mafia soldiers took a step forward, their guns still up. Court clocked how quickly the men's demeanor had changed. None of them had thought it would come to this, so they'd been relaxed. But now they were quickly ratcheting up for a killing. Shit. But unlike the Romanians, Court did not move. Instead, he said, "Why don't we all just take a deep breath?" Doreen Balan laughed again, looking at the strange man, his hands empty, his options limited. Yet he was trying to control this scene. Balan said, "I am calm, friend, but I am not at peace. I will be at peace, however, as soon as you kill the capo in his safe house." The American let out a long sigh, and then he said, "No." It had the ring of lament. Balan took several steps forward, closing the distance to 15 meters. The American stayed in the doorway, the light behind him, the blowing snow in front of him. The Godfather took a drag on his cigarette and regarded the man a little more closely. He could make out some of his features. He saw that the American did not look scared, resigned to his fate. No, he just looked incredibly disappointed. Balan said, "I would hate to end you here, friend, but you know too much. You can tell the Italians we were the ones behind what you did tonight. If you aren't going to eliminate the remainder of my enemies, then you will force me to eliminate you." The American's shoulders slumped. "You sure you want to do this?" Balan moved closer still, and his men followed behind, spreading out over 10 meters to the left and right. He said, "If we did not have such an advantage, to be honest, we would not try. But we have you here now, at gunpoint. So it occurs to me, I have all the leverage." The American said, "Or you just think you do." Balan again glanced back to his men. "There are 6 of us, 5 with guns pointed at you. What special skill, training, or knowledge do we need right now that we lack?" The American blew out a slow breath, then said, "I mean, a couple things come to mind." Balan held his hand up, making sure the others didn't fire just yet. "Oh, please, please, tell me what we missed. How would you conduct your own killing better?" "Well, for starters, I'd be aware of the fact that I didn't choose this ground. My target did. And with that knowledge, I would have to ask myself one question. Why here? Could the target have somehow prepped the battle space?" Balan didn't understand the phrase. "Prepped the what?" "The battle space. Look around you. This is my territory, not yours." Avram spoke up behind the Nashul, confusion in his voice. "It's the roof of a parking garage." The American did not reply to Avram. Instead, he raised his hands, a show of surrender, or at least it had seemed like, until he held his left hand higher than his right, and then took a step forward, out of the stairwell and under the faint glow of a light pole. It was clear now that the asset held something small, between his thumb and forefinger. Balan squinted in the drifting snowfall to try to make it out. The American said, and I'd have to ask myself one more question. What the fuck is that thing in that dude's hand? Balan cocked his head while the men behind him readied their weapons. What is in your hand? It's a dead man's switch. I let go of this button I'm pressing, and you fuckers are vaporized. Doreen Balan gave off a little laugh. He wasn't buying it for a second. It looks like a key fob, the American said. That truck I stole from the Italians. It was loaded with Semtex when I took it. But when I gave it to you, it was missing 2 satchels. Didn't you dumbasses read the manifest? Balan turned, looked to Avram. Avram looked back to him, wide-eyed. After a moment, he shrugged. He didn't know if their people had checked the manifest or not. But then Avram's head cleared, and he spoke now, his English heavily accented. Eli, we followed you today. You did not come up here. I lost your men in Piazza Romana at 2:20, and then I came here. At 2:55, I was back in the piazza. If they didn't report to you that they lost me, then you're working with bad information. Avram's face showed uncertainty when Balan again looked his way. The American continued. One of those 2 satchels is here on the roof. You can try to guess where it is, but you'd probably be wrong. This transmitter in my hand is tied to the detonator. I let it go, and your families will be able to bury all of you in the same coffee can. Avram kept his running translation going, but he steadied his pistol on the chest of the silhouette in the doorway. Balan said, That is a good bluff, I must admit. But you had no reason to expect a double cross from me, so you would not have prepared bombs at your rally point. You're the fucking Romanian mob. I had all the reason in the world to expect a double cross from you. Balan said nothing. Listen, if you fulfill your end of the bargain, if you get me on that ship to Turkey, then I'm a problem that just goes away. Balan shook his head. He didn't like being threatened, especially in front of his men. The ship to Turkey is not under my control. I have arranged nothing for it. The Turks don't take stowaways. The one in 4 days' time, I can make some calls. I can coordinate. I'm not waiting 4 days. I'll kill you guys now and be on my way. Balan took a moment, looked to his men, to the American 10 meters away, to the small item in the American's hand. He glanced back to the row of parked vehicles behind him. To Ali, he said, Look for the Semtex. The big man lowered his Browning pistol, then turned and looked back towards the row of vehicles at the rooftop parking lot's northern edge. He began peering into the windows with a flashlight, beginning with a small Fiat. Vartan went to help his partner, moving to the next car to look inside. While this was happening, Balan said, I just want to know, are you brave or are you stupid? Who says I can't be both?
Maybe tonight we have dinner here.
Court Gentry held the device in his hand. It was in fact a key fob, but in the poor light, and with his hand covering the bulk of it, he knew the Romanians would not be able to determine this for sure. And key fobs send a remote radio transmission to a receiver unit, and can quite easily be rigged to detonate an explosive. The older man regarded him for a moment. Then he nodded. I have made my life's work determining other people's motivations, commitment, skill, and intentions. Same, Court said solemnly. And looking into your eyes, friend, I see all I need to see. You are scared. You are frightened about what is happening. It occurs to me that you are a killer, and if you truly held my life and my men's lives in your fingertips, as you say, you would not be scared at all. Court said, Your misjudgment is going to get you and your boys killed. I might be good with a gun, but I don't have a lot of experience with explosives. I am scared of overkill. There's an even chance that when I let my finger off this button, I'm going to die right here along with you assholes. But I'm feeling lucky. He raised the phone.
You feeling lucky?
How about you? Balan shook his head slowly.
Good day,
I don't believe. From
Oh,
back of the cars, a shouting
I'll
Romanian
message you, but I want you to
shouting
call
at
Secura
the
Dentist, see if
pointing
they
at
do
the
deep
passenger
cleanings.
side floorboard
I'll
of the
message
van.
you on Zelda.
Yeah.
The Nashul shouted to him in Romanian.
As soon as possible on Hcmc.
Yeah.
If they even do it.
And stepping away
The
quickly
deep cleaning is where they clean the tut.
Balan spun back in Court's
Deep
direction,
cleaning is
throwing
more
his hands
involved
up
than
and
regular
out
cleaning.
in front of him.
Yeah.
Wait!
Okay.
Can't wait. And Court did not.
Sakura.
He pressed the button on the fob in his hand, while at the same time he spun back for the stairwell, diving for his life, because he had not been bluffing. The shockwave, the blinding light, and the heat enveloped him all at once. He was thrown through the doorway, his feet off the ground, and he flipped head over heels before tumbling along the concrete landing. And then his right shoulder and the back of his head slammed hard against the metal railing next to the concrete steps that led down through the parking garage. Court lay there, dazed, facing back out towards the rooftop. His eyes were unfixed and whited out from the flash he hadn't been able to spin away from in time. His ears rang. In front of him, there was too much smoke to tell what was going on, too much disorientation to pick out targets. Court didn't know who was dead or alive out there, but he knew he himself was out of the fight for a few seconds. His head dropped down onto the concrete as he struggled to come back to his senses. Court had been telling the truth when he said he did not have a ton of experience with Semtex, and for this reason he built the IED smaller than he probably needed to. This meant the explosion, as powerful as it was, could have been a lot more powerful. He was certain the guy who dropped the flashlight was dead. He had been right on top of the bomb when Court pressed the vehicle's key fob, sending a signal to the searchlight that was wanted to stop. But if Court was still alive, it was very possible that some, if not all, of the other 5 men remained a threat. His head cleared a little, his vision improved somewhat, and looking up now into the smoke, he saw that the metal door to the parking lot was open in front of him, damaged, but still on its hinges. He spun around on his back and kicked it closed, then rolled onto his stomach and climbed to his knees, using a railing to pull himself to his feet. He moved to the stairs, took the first couple of steps down, then stopped. He had a means of escape set up. He could be clear of this scene in an instant, free of the threat of the Balan Brigazi in seconds, out of the city in minutes, and out of the country in just a few hours. But there on the stairwell, he hesitated, looked back at the bent and twisted door. It was shut, and smoke drifted through it, visible in the light from the bulb above the landing. A shout outside the door was answered by another shout, telling Court for certain that there were people still alive out there. Court paused a moment more, but not for long, because he realized that as much as he wanted to, he could not run away. Not again. No. His only chance of getting into Russia was finding out the name of that ship from Turkey and learning where it would berth while in Constanza. Even if these motherfuckers wouldn't help him secure passage with the smugglers, he told himself that if he knew where the ship was, he could find his own way aboard. But only if he went back out onto the roof and got the intel he needed. He drew his weapon, a suppressed 6-hour P365XL pistol with an extended 17-round magazine, and moved for the door. Along the way, he reached up with the barrel of the weapon and raked it across the exposed light bulb, bursting it and blanketing the top floor landing in darkness. He heard another shout. It was back several meters from the door, and it sounded like Doreen Balad himself giving orders to his surviving men. Court held the gun at his hip with his right hand, and his left hand reached for the door. Just as he put his hand on the latch, however, the metal door burst open, slamming into his arm and shoulder. Someone on the other side had kicked it, and someone else came rushing through towards him in the low light and hanging smoke. Court got the impression these guys had expected him to be fleeing down the stairs right now, and he'd surprised them by moving back to the door. Court fired twice into a big body slamming into him at a full run. He was knocked back to the railing by the massive form, and then he fell back over the side. 3. Court's attacker tumbled over the rail with him, and Court was forced to let go of his pistol so he could grab the horizontal metal bar to keep from falling awkwardly to the stairs below. His right shoulder screamed in pain as he wrenched it, nearly dislocating the ball and socket joint as he hung over the stairs. The man who'd hit him continued on, straight down the stairwell, crashing on the steps just above the second-floor landing. Court heard the crack of bones, and then he heard both his own gun and the other man's pistol clank on the concrete, and he tried to clock where they landed, somewhere beneath his swinging legs. And then he looked back up towards the landing and saw a man pushing through the bent door with his gun up. Court let go of the rail just before a shot rang out. Dropping through the darkness, he crumpled his legs, crashed violently on the dead body, and rolled to the second-floor landing. He felt around for a weapon, listening to the Romanian gangster above, racing down the concrete stairs in his direction. The man leapt onto the landing above. Court found the grip of his pistol and wrapped his left hand around it. But in his haste, he hefted it upside down with the barrel facing away. The Romanian made the turn on the landing. Court could see his outline and make out the glint of a stainless steel pistol in his hand. Court swiveled his weapon up in the descending man's direction, slipped his left pinky into the trigger guard, and thrust his left arm out straight. He pulled the trigger, and the upside-down gun snapped back against his hand and finger. He fired 2 more times with his pinky, the weapon bucking hard with the unconventional grip of his offhand. He clearly hit the Brigazi man with at least one of the rounds, because the man fell to his knees and then onto his face before crashing down the stairs. Court flipped the gun in the air and caught it right side up with his right hand, and then he dumped 3 more bullets into the body as it came to rest next to the other man, just 6 feet away from where Court knelt. He then fired an insurance round into the back of the skull of the big man who'd fallen from the 3rd floor and now lay face down. He stood quickly on shaky legs now. His right knee and left elbow hurt from the impact after dropping down the stairs and his subsequent tumble to the landing. The back of his head was bleeding and sore from the initial explosion, and his right shoulder felt like he'd seriously strained or perhaps even torn some muscles arresting his fall over the railing. But he made it to his feet. His gun still had bullets, and he still had a mission. He had to find someone alive up on the rooftop. There were 2 men dead in the stairwell, and he was certain at least one more had been killed above. But that left Doreen along himself, plus potentially 2 others. He dropped the magazine from the SIG and seated another, and as he climbed the stairs, he began clearing the stairwell above him, hunting for more attackers. There was a light on his gun, but he did not flash it. He could take in enough of the scene from the ambient glow filtering in from the rooftop, so there was no need to give away his position. He moved wide in the stairwell, not hugging the banister, but staying at the wall, his pistol steady in front of him. He ignored the many pains across his body and concentrated on his objective. As he ascended around the landing for the top floor, his gaze bounced back downstairs. He was always aware that threats could approach from any angle, not just the angle he expected them to. At the top of the landing, he stood wide at the door, his back to the concrete wall, and readied himself to act. Soon he spun around, crossing the threshold, but just as he did so, another man did the same from out in the rooftop parking lot. Armed with a handgun, the big man was nearly a mirror image of Court, raising his gun as he spun into the doorway, just as Court himself was in the process of doing. But it wasn't a perfect mirror. Their bodies moved in unison, but then Court Gentry's gun fired first. The man didn't fall immediately, so Court leapt to the side, grabbed the man's pistol, and yanked it towards him. The larger Romanian threw his body into Court as the American fired again, point blank into his big belly, and then both men tumbled back down the stairs, end over end. At the landing below, Court found himself disoriented again. His right elbow and shoulder screamed in fresh pain, but his gun remained in his hand at least, and he raised it back up in the dim light in search of his target. Before he could fire, flashes and noise at the rooftop landing above him told him someone was firing bursts from a fully automatic machine pistol. Sparks all around him indicated the shooter above had no concern about hitting his wounded colleague down here, so Court pulled the wounded man to him, rolled his big body on top of him, and then pushed his right arm out between the left side of the man's face-down torso and his left arm. Protected by over 200 pounds of meat, Court began firing up the stairs towards where he'd seen the flashes. He felt bullets impact the man he sheltered behind. He heard a loud grunt, and he continued firing. He couldn't aim. He couldn't see his target with the body covering his head. But what he could not achieve through marksmanship, he attempted to accomplish through sheer volume. After 13 rounds, his gun locked open on an empty magazine, and just as he pressed the mag release button and fought to get his left hand down to his belt to draw his last mag, a body rolled over the dead man above him, then slapped against the wall just behind him. The shooter with the machine pistol lay there, his open, unblinking eyes sparkling from the light the stairs. Court sat up quickly and reloaded his weapon, shifted around, then fired once into the obviously dead man's left temple at point-blank range. No hesitation, no remorse, because Court had no time. He staggered out onto the rooftop 30 seconds later, his hand on the door jamb to keep his battered body upright, and in front of him, he took in the carnage. Human remains, burning automobiles, and there on the pavement, just 10 yards from the stairwell, he saw exactly what he wanted to see. Darin Alan, the Nashul, alive. Court shined his weapon light on the man, and quickly determined he was unarmed. He looked like he was suffering from multiple fractures of his right leg. He'd pushed himself up to a seated position, but he could not stand, and his right foot was turned at an unnatural angle in front of him. Court knelt over the man slowly, his weapon to his side. The older man's mouth bled, and the initial blast of Semtex had clearly sent a chunk of one of the vehicles directly into his leg. And behind the blood on the man's face, Court saw that the Nashul was utterly stricken with fear. Softly, and with considerable melancholy, Court said, "You have successfully completed stage fuck around, and you are now entering stage find out."
Yeah,
The
bitch.
older man blinked, but did
Oh,
not
he's
reply,
about to find out.
so Court continued as he distractedly rubbed his wrenched right shoulder. "Do you, or do you not, have a way for me to get on that boat in Constanza?" I will make some calls. Give me time, and I... Do you have a way? It's not that simple, but that sounds like a no. The man spit on the ground in front of him. Bits of teeth came out with the blood and phlegm. Why do you even want to go into Russia? You're an American. That's my business. It's not business. It's madness. Court waved his pistol around the burning wreckage on the roof. Everything in this fucking world is madness. Back to Balan, he said. What's the name of the boat? Let me call Istanbul. I can talk to... What's the name of the boat? The Megan. The Megan. When does it call at Constanza? 4 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. I will contact Istanbul, see if I can get... He stopped talking when the American began to slowly rise. Court said, "No worries, boss. I'll take it from here." He raised the pistol towards the wounded man. Please, no. Court sighed. I just killed 5 of your men. You didn't beg for their lives. Don't beg for your own. But I am begging. I have money. A lot of... Don't need money. Do need a ride. Milan raised a hand up as if to protect himself from the bullet he knew was coming his way. Wait! I already told you, Court said. I can't wait. Court shot the Nashul through the bridge of his nose. The round exited the back of his head, and he dropped dead onto his back. It took Court a full minute to stagger back down one flight of stairs to the second level, and here he stepped out the door and into a darkened parking garage. The floor was half full of vehicles, and Court ignored every car he passed, until he arrived at a gray 2014 Mercedes E300 with a little body damage and a cracked rear window. He pulled a second key fob out of his pocket and clicked it, and the trunk opened. Court retrieved a satchel from the trunk, then carried it with him to the driver's seat. He opened the door and dropped in roughly, wincing with pain, and fired the engine. There was no emotion on his face as he put the car in gear and began driving towards the circular ramp, just a glazed look. Tonight had been a disaster, but worrying about it was for later. He just had to get clear of the scene. He took the winding ramp, made it to the first level, then headed down for the ground level, already thinking about his route out of town. But before he reached the exit, headlights appeared directly in front of him. He slammed on the brakes, threw the transmission into reverse, but didn't hit the gas. He just waited. The second vehicle pulled behind the first, and they both stopped in front of him. He couldn't make them out behind the headlights, but he neither saw nor heard police lights or sirens, so he ruled out the possibility that these were cops. He ran potential scenarios in his mind and quickly put together that these were most likely more Balan Brigazi goons, and he was in serious trouble. The passenger side door of the car in front of him opened. He saw this from the interior light, and as a man emerged and approached his car, Court saw 3 more men inside the vehicle, a dark gray sedan. Court knew what mobsters looked like, and these assholes looked like mobsters. He stopped on the gas. The car lurched into reverse, and the man on the ramp in front of him scrambled back for the sedan. Court used the Mercedes backup camera to show him the way, and as the vehicle sped and sped, he turned the steering wheel to stay with the narrow, winding ramp. After no more than 6 or 7 seconds, he scraped the concrete wall with his left rear panel. Sparks flew as he adjusted, but he kept his speed up as he continued climbing, winding, reversing back up the parking garage. In front of him, the gray sedan and the bigger SUV behind it chased him, barreling down. He heard the crack of a handgun, and then a second, and with a third pop over the sounds of screaming engines, the windshield in front of him cracked, and a bullet snapped by his right ear. Court straightened the wheel when he got up to the second level, and this shot him out into the garage, roaring backwards now at 40 miles per hour. He raced between a row of parked cars there, his speed increasing and increasing as he neared the northern edge of the lot. A pair of strong steel cables provided a barrier to keep people and vehicles from going off the side of the building, but Court knew that hitting them with the rear end of his Mercedes at 60 miles per hour would cause the cables to fail, and he would go sailing out into the sky. And this was the best plan he could come up with. And then something else occurred to him. As he shot backwards with his foot standing on the gas pedal, he opened the car door, heaved something out, then pressed his head against the headrest and let go of the wheel, crossing his arms in front of him. The front passenger in the Mercedes was a 36-year-old Brigazi soldier named Dalka. He was senior to the other 5 men with him, and he'd been the one trying to raise both the Nashwal and Avram these past few minutes, since they were ordered to return to the rally point. They hadn't been close enough to see the explosion 5 minutes earlier, but as they raced through Ferentari in the 2 vehicles, they caught the flashes of gunfire from the rooftop of the abandoned medical clinic's parking garage, so Dalka knew they were headed into a fight. Now they watched a stranger in a strange vehicle backing up at high speed through a parking lot, and they pursued, even though it was obvious how this fight was going to end. And then it happened. 30 meters in front of them, the gray Mercedes crashed backwards through the cables at the edge of the rooftop. It flew out of the covered parking garage and fell into the night. They didn't hear a crash over the sound of their racing engines, but as both vehicles screeched to a halt, the men saw the headlights shining up, indicating the car had impacted with the ground and was somehow still facing skyward. Romanians filed out of both vehicles, and Dalka barked an order to a man who emerged from the SUV. The man dutifully unslung his AK-47 and tossed it to Dalka, who caught it. All 6 ran to the edge of the garage now, right where the Mercedes had disappeared. Dalka looked down. The Mercedes was there, its grille facing up, leaning against the building just 5 meters across the single-lane alleyway. Smoke and steam poured from it. Light snow swirled around it, and the dead engine hissed and clanked. The Romanian knew there had been no time for the driver to bail out. He was still inside. With a slight smile, Dalka leveled his AK at the Mercedes. He could rake the underside of the car. The heavy bullets would go right through and into the driver's seat, and he could shred the man right then and there. He squeezed off one round, stopped to flip the weapon's fire selector switch into fully automatic mode, and when he did, he heard a loud click to his left, just past 2 of his men. His head turned towards the sound, and there he saw something. Right next to the wheel well of an old Fiat, an olive drab-colored satchel lay there, as if discarded. Something was written on the side of the satchel. Explosia, A.S. Dalka blinked once, registering the danger he was in, but that was all he registered, because the Semtex plastic explosives inside the satchel detonated, and the second floor of the parking garage erupted in fire. As soon as the debris stopped raining down on the Mercedes, Court Gentry fought his way free of his seatbelt, kicked open the door of the ruined sedan, and slid out unceremoniously, amid a shower of broken windshield glass crumpling down onto the alley, before slowly pulling himself back upright next to the wrecked car. He staggered off, clutching his shoulder, in serious pain, if not seriously wounded. In addition to the joint injury, He was covered in cuts and bruises, but his body functioned, and the vast majority of his blood remained inside his body. Still, he looked like hell as he limped along as fast as he could. He hadn't shaved or cut his hair in 6 months. His beard was ragged, brown with flecks of gray and glinting with broken glass, and his dark mustache was unkempt, as blood dripped from his nose into it. His hair was long, well past his collar, dirty and sweat-drenched. A grayish-purple welt began on his right cheekbone and went up past his eye and onto his forehead. He ducked into another alley as emergency vehicles raced past, then stepped back out onto the street and hurried on. Court wasn't clear of the area yet. He'd need to steal a car at some point, but he already was evaluating everything that had happened. As he hobbled along, as the reality of what had transpired caught up to him, as the ramifications of what it meant became clear, tears began dripping down his bruised and reddened face. It was exhaustion, he knew. It was desperation, and it was fear. Not fear for his own safety, but fear of not accomplishing his mission. He knew he'd been taking wild chances these past few months, flashing money, threatening dangerous people, throwing his skill set around as a calling card. He'd been fraught, frantic, and he'd taken off the guardrails that had kept him alive in this insane business for 20 years. He knew he was damn lucky that he wasn't dead yet, although he told himself the day was still young. But still, he had to get into Russia. Crossing the border into the nation wasn't impossible, but doing it with the resources he needed to do the job he had to do while there had, so far, proven to be beyond his capacity. For 6 months, he'd been dismissed, misinformed, double-crossed, lied to. He'd tried other people's ideas, his own ideas, spur-of-the-moment plans, and all of it had come to naught. And now tonight, he didn't know how much time he had left to get to Russia, but he knew he could not waste a moment by starting from scratch yet again. The tears continued. It was less the fatigue and stress, and more the pain of unimaginable sadness. There was one person in this world who mattered to him. One person in this world he would die to save. But conversely, he knew that his dying would not save her. He had to stay alive for her. And though his actions and his behavior had become more and more risky as he became more and more desperate, he still knew what he had to do. He had to get to Constanza on his own, find a way aboard that Turkish ship on his own, and then go to Russia on his own. There, he'd just have to figure out the next part. He'd head to the port now, sneak his way or slaughter his way on board the Migan when it arrived. He boosted the ignition of an old Toyota two-door he found in a chained lot almost a mile from the parking garage, and he fired the engine. He wiped the last of tonight's tears from his eyes, then threw the vehicle into gear. In seconds, he was heading east, towards the highway, towards the coast, towards Constanza, towards the port, towards the Black Sea, and, God willing, towards Russia. What would happen in Russia was a problem for tomorrow. Today's problem was getting on that fucking boat from Turkey before it left him behind. He drove east through the night, headlong into an abyss that he saw no way to avoid. 4. 1 month earlier. Authentic colonial mansions from the 1700s and 1800s dotted rural Northern Virginia. But the massive hilltop home outside Charlottesville was not an original. True, it possessed the columns and the red brick of a stately antebellum, and with 9,000 square feet of living space and a rolling 21-acre lot, it looked and felt the part. But this home had actually been constructed in 1981 as the weekend retreat of a DC-based tobacco lobbyist. No one who lived here in Albemarle County had a clue. But the property on Piney Creek Lane was now owned by the Central Intelligence Agency and used as a safe house, a clandestine debriefing site, and, on occasion, as a holding facility. Former agency employees, a husband and wife, lived here and managed the property. Not a bad gig for retirees. But at present, the couple found themselves securely ensconced in an apartment in Crystal City, while this mansion was occupied by 10 other people. 9 members of the CIA's global response staff supervised the facility, and they were all here for one purpose: to ensure that the one other person here on the property, the lone detainee, did not leave. That was not to say the detainee did not have some freedom of movement. He was confined to a locked room on the second floor at night. A guard was positioned outside the door with a sidearm and a radio, and another guard sat on a cushioned lawn chair on the balcony outside. But although the detainee could not walk the entirety of the 21 acres at will, he was free to move around the house and the driveway during the day. At a few minutes before 7 p.m., the October sun had long since dipped behind the distant Shenandoah Mountains to the west. But down lights blared near the turnaround in front of the garage, shining on the facility's one prisoner as he stood there, his feet planted and his eyes shifting back and forth in front of him. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he evaluated the 5 global response security men facing him. And then he ducked low, tucked his shoulder, and began rushing forward, quickly ramming the chest of one of the young and fit guards. As the GRS officer flew back, the prisoner spun around, pirouetting on his left foot, and then he leapt into the air, bringing up his right knee and bashing the hip of another guard, sending him spinning to the concrete. The prisoner rose over a third guard, crashing into the man's left shoulder and sending him down to the ground next to his mates. Up in the air still, the prisoner hooked a basketball with his left hand. It bounced off the backboard above him, swirled the rim, then dropped through the net. Zach Hightower landed back on his Nikes, stumbled a few feet before righting himself, and then put his hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Steam poured from his mouth, from his gray-blonde hair. The heavy breathing and sweat vapor from all the men on the driveway created a mild fog under the basket. "I can do that shit all night," he blared. One of the guards, a bearded 29-year-old, climbed back to his feet after taking the shoulder charge. "You sure? You look pretty smoked, Dad." "Well, I'm not the dick who just flat-backed it on the driveway, son." The nightly 3-on-3 pickup game had been going on for months, and though Hightower wasn't the best player out there, he was undoubtedly the most competitive. A man in the process of wiping driveway grit from his hands complained. "Come on, Zach, that was like 4 fouls in 5 seconds. Hightower took the ball from one of the guys on his team. "You calling him?" Another chimed in. "You do know you're supposed to dribble every once in a while, right? What are you going to do about it? Throw me in jail?" Zach asked. Dave, the oldest GRS man at 59, and the officer in charge of this facility, sat on a bench by the garage, looking on. Born and raised in Alabama, his drawl made it sound as if he'd never left. "Bread and water rations, Hightower. I can make that happen." Zach wiped sweat from his brow now. "I'm smoking pork chops tonight. No way you're missing that by locking me up in my room with a piece of toast." Dave put a hand up in surrender. "If I get the biggest chop, we won't beat you with rubber hoses in your sleep." Zach looked off into the night a moment, as if he were actually contemplating the deal. Finally, he said, "I can live with that." If there had been anyone here to observe the relationship between prisoner and prison guards, they would have had a very rough time determining who was who. But it would be obvious soon enough to an outsider that although guards were here to keep the prisoner secure, to a man, they'd all gone off mission. During the day, the detainee drove the massive tractor around the pasture land, cutting the last of the year's hay for fun, even though another GRS man was always close by on the saddle of one of the 5 horses on the property. And at night, the 10 men drank together in the dining room that they'd turned into something of a low-end Irish pub. They all watched movies and TV shows in the big den and told war stories over cigars and bourbon on the back deck. The basketball game ended at 7. Zach's team lost by 4, despite nobody calling his myriad fouls. And as they all began walking inside, the prisoner said, "Baseball's my game, but we need 18 for that. Next time I get myself in enough trouble to get my ass locked up, I'll know to make myself a bigger threat, so I'll have more goons watching me." An hour and a half later, the men sat on the back deck. Through the moonlight, the Shenandoah Mountains were visible over the forests of red maple and river birch, and they ate glazed pork chops and baked potatoes, washed their meals down with Lone Star beer, and chatted about families, sports, and war. All the men were former military or law enforcement, but Zach Hightower had the best stories of the group, peppered with caveats about not being able to give full details due to classification constraints. To a man, everyone had TS, top secret security clearances, but none of them had anything close to Hightower's TS-SCI, sensitive compartmented information level, so he was limited in what he could say. In truth, however, that didn't slow him down very much. Gas heaters kept the men warm in the 40-degree evening, and there was talk of watching a NASCAR race inside once dinner was done. Zach stood to throw his paper plate in the big Rubbermaid by the back door before heading in to grab some dessert. Dave went inside to take a call on his mobile, and one of the younger guys passed a can of dip around the table for those who partook, which was most everyone, other than the guy who was officially designated the prisoner. The men soon all filed inside with their drinks in their hands, but they didn't get very far before Dave appeared, a fresh intensity on his face. To the other GRS officers, he said, "Clean this shit up. We've got brass inbound. ETA, 5 mics." "Dang," Hightower muttered. "I was gonna dish up some cover." "Some muckety-muck from Langley's doing a drop-in," Dave explained. "We have to go back to being your abusive guard force." Zach went back up the stairs to his room, a 41-year-old Californian named Loeb followed behind to lock him in. But before Loeb shut the door, he said, "Zach, the bottle." The big man pulled a half pint of early times whiskey out of his back pocket. "I checked the Geneva Convention. It's a fucking war crime to serve well liquor to a prisoner anyway." Loeb took the bottle and said, "You might want to dress up in case they're here to talk to you." "Sure, man. I'll put on my Sunday best." At the front door of the colonial home, Dave and Rick stood, arms crossed in front of them, while a Lincoln Navigator disgorged 3 individuals. A pair of men climbed out of the front and stood at the grill, and from the back, a single African-American woman emerged. Rick said, "Are we supposed to know who that is?" Dave answered immediately, "That's Angela Lacey." "Oh, shit. Agency Lacey?" The nickname had gotten around in the past few months, as the CIA officer's star had risen around Langley. "One and the same. She's getting herself a reputation." Dave nodded as the woman approached up the driveway. He said, "She has Brewer's old job." Rick said, "Fingers crossed she's not like Brewer." "She's got a pulse, so she can't be too much like Brewer, can she?" Just then, he extended a hand as Lacey climbed the steps to the porch. In his southern drawl, he said, "Evening, ma'am." "Hi, David. Please call me Angela. How's your detainee?" "Call me Dave. Hightower is fine." Together, the 3 of them walked back into the house. "I need to speak with him in private, please." The GRS officer nodded. "Sure, of course. You want us to do cuffs or zips or anything?" She shook her head. "Won't be necessary." She stopped, and Dave stopped too. "Unless you know something I don't." "Not at all. He's the easiest son of a gun I've ever had to watch over." He added, "He's been no trouble, ma'am. All the guys like him." "Not their job to like him, David." Defensively, he replied. "They're doing their jobs. He's not going anywhere. We're just not exactly running it like Gitmo around here." Lacey let it go. "Better take me to him." "Right this way, ma'am." Zach Hightower wore baggy cargo shorts and a red Washington Nationals hoodie, flip-flops, and eyeglasses as he walked along the second-floor hallway with Loeb and Kietrowski. The global response men, acting almost comically serious and officious now, led him down the staircase, their hands on his shoulders, and then into a ground-floor bonus room set up as an office. Here he found himself in front of a woman in jeans and a beige button-up sweater. Her heavy wool coat lay on the couch next to her, and she held an iPad in her hands. Dave stood nearby, hands on his hips, and Zach gave him an inquisitive look, as if to ask, "Who the hell is this?" "Come in, Mr. Hightower. Sit down," she commanded, and Zach did as instructed. Once he dropped into a chair across from her, the woman looked at the GRS team leader. "That's all for now, Dave. Thanks." Dave, Loeb, and Kitrowski exited the room, shutting the door as they left. It was quiet a moment, and then, without getting up or extending a hand, the woman said, "I'm Angela Lacey." Zach knew the name. CIA, of course. Mid-level, but moving on up, with a straight shot to the executive offices on the 7th floor. Word from the guys watching over him was that Lacey was working directly for the Deputy Director for Operations, Trey Watkins, the man who'd ordered Zach locked up 6 months earlier. This should be a blast, he thought. And one more thing occurred to him. This woman was now in the role previously held by Suzanne Brewer, a CIA officer who'd been killed earlier in the year. Brewer had been dirty. She'd gotten what was coming to her. But Lacey's sullied predecessor only served to make Zach less than fully trustful of this woman. Just to fuck with her, he said. Kitrowski did not put his name on that meatball sub, and I'm due 3 hots and a cot. So as far as I'm concerned, it was fair game. Cute, she said, though her face indicated she didn't mean it. That is not why I'm here. Better tell me what's up then. A rooster crowed outside by the barn, while Zach waited patiently for the woman to speak. Angela Lacey looked the man over. It appeared to her
Sạc trước à?
Yeah.
Thôi,
Oh, you were there?
Ok, anh sạc
Is it
đi.
you?
Em lấy trước chứ. Thôi, sạc đi.
Oh,
Thôi,
so
sạc
sorry.
đi, sạc đi.
No, 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 no,
Không
no,
sao,
no.
no, không sao. Ok, sạc
Okay,
đi, sạc đi.
sorry. No, no, you come. No. No. Okay. No, come. No.
Sạc đi, không sao.
Okay.
Sạc trước đi, sạc đây. Ok.
That a half year of confinement had left him with little to do other than work out. He was a tall man, but fit, lean, and muscular for his age, which she knew to be 56. Her initial impression was that he was a little too into himself, but she'd read his file and she knew his background, so she had somewhat expected this. Finally, she said, "Let's not start with why I'm here. Let's start with why you are here. I can't say I completely understand it." "Me either. Can I go?" His arms were crossed in front of him, and although Lacey knew this to be a defensive posture, she got the feeling that with Hightower, it was just to show off his biceps straining against the hoodie, because this man didn't seem to have a defensive bone in his body. "You may not," she responded. "I know what you did that put you on the wrong side of the 7th floor, but I don't know why they didn't throw you in prison or find some other hole to toss you down. Instead, you're here, living in a mansion in the hills." "This isn't a mansion. I toilet runs, the roof leaks, electricity can be wonky. They don't make them like they used to." "Apologies about your concerns pertaining to the accommodations. Still, you look like you're doing okay. You appear healthy, better than most of the younger security men here." He shrugged. "They don't make them like they used to." She sniffed at this, then went serious. "My question remains. Why do you suppose you're being coddled?" "Coddled?" "The roofs at Leavenworth leak too. Why aren't you there?" Zach leaned back in his chair. "Can I give you some advice?" Lacey did not blink. "Drink more protein shakes?" Zach did not laugh. Instead, he said, "You're just a little too inquisitive for your job. All the stiff suits I used to work for at CIA knew better than to go looking for information that their bosses didn't offer up. Ignorance is something of a virtue the higher up you go in your organization." "And where are all those stiff suits you used to work for?" Zach's eyebrow rose, and he paused, then said, "Dead, retired, shit can." "I'll keep my own counsel if it's all the same to you." Zach said nothing, so Lacey added, "Any plans on what you'll do when you get out of here?" "Haven't really thought about it. I like it here." "I find that hard to believe. Surely you miss the teams. You miss Ground Branch." Hightower had been on SEAL Team 6 before joining the CIA as a paramilitary operations officer in the Special Activities Division, Ground Branch. He'd been out of the agency for years now, running freelance, often for the CIA, as well as working as a hunting guide. "The hell I do," he said. "Getting up at OAS crack 30 every day, dodging bullets from the enemy and bullshit from the brass and the suits, pumping 80 pounds in 100% humidity. Here I roll out of my bunk at the crack of noon, watch some TV, goof off with the boys, and eat government cheese for dinner." "So I've heard. Why do I get the feeling you are running a cult around here?" Zach grinned at the woman now. "What can I say? My vibe attracts my tribe." "It's pretty sad when the guard's role model is the prisoner they're watching over." Y'all keeping me from getting out? You could send them all home if I'm bored, but I'm still going to sit in this mansion and watch the streaming services. There was a little twinkle in his eye that she picked up on. Are you trying to charm me too? I'm not so sure on your demographic. Give me time, Hcmc. It's Angela. What did I say? She made a face of displeasure, then said, a lot of people are still quite furious with you for what happened in Cuba. Zach began to speak up, and then Lacey added, but I'm not one of them. You did the right thing, the smart thing. Zach had gone against agency orders while working a private job in Cuba. Langley wanted to keep a bad actor alive to use him, and Zach decided to kill Viola to prevent a potential bad outcome. He'd been held here ever since as punishment, though personally, Zach kind of thought that he'd probably save the war. Is that an official position? He asked. Not hardly. It went quiet in the room again. And then Lacey said, somehow I have the sneaking suspicion that you always knew we'd be coming to ask you for help. He grinned a little. And that answers your question as to why I wasn't thrown in a dungeon. Right. Lock you down, but butter you up for the next thing we need. Zach shrugged. I've got a good thing going here. Me and the guys in a ping pong tournament we're right in the middle of. I'm in the semifinals. The last thing I want to do is run off now. Lacey gave off an air of annoyance, as if she'd played around with this man long enough. You will go to Central Europe, to Czechia, and you will work with a small international team. Doing what? There is a high-value target there, or close by there, a man no one has been able to find. You want me to find it? Now Angela's face grew tortically, and she looked uncomfortable. Actually, we want you to kill him. Zach nodded. Sounds good. The woman from CIA reacted with surprise. Raising her voice caused her carefully hidden southern accent to come out a little. You don't even want to know why? Zach was completely unfazed. With nonchalance, he said, if it will make you feel better, sure, whatever. Lacey recovered and said, Russian military intelligence has been perpetrating acts of sabotage and other interference in Central Europe, trying to damage NATO equipment on the way to Ukraine, mostly. But they've also targeted oil refineries, assassinated dissidents, poisoned water supplies, run surveillance on foreign intelligence officers, things like that. Zach said, yeah, we get the news here. That shit is happening every day. That thing in Gdansk was cold-blooded. 2 weeks earlier, a fire had started at the port of Gdansk, Poland, that took 3 days to extinguish and killed 5 firefighters, in addition to destroying 20 tons of sophisticated attack-missiles shipped from the United States. There had been many dozens of such incidents in the past couple of years, and so far, the law enforcement agencies of the Central European nations, where the attacks had happened, had been unable to catch many of the culprits. Lacey said, we have intelligence that one of the networks, by far the most productive network, is being run by a GRU lieutenant colonel named Karol Dvorak. Zach cocked his head. That's not a Russian name. He had a Russian mom who lived in Czechoslovakia. She married a Czech. But Dvorak moved back to Moscow when he was of age, joined the military, then joined GRU. He's been working as a military intelligence sweeper in the West for decades, and in the past couple of years, he's become the mastermind of their asymmetric operations in Europe. He's a very capable individual that the West would very much like to remove from the playing field. Lacey continued. And it's not just him. Dvorak has assembled a team of foreign agents. He's running sabotage ops, surveillance ops, targeted killing ops. His network is growing, strengthening. It's damaging Western interests. Zach remained matter-of-fact about it. He needs to die, I get it. But why me? Bad things might happen in Western nations where the governments do not want bad things to happen. Deputy Director Watkins doesn't want our fingerprints anywhere near this. Hence, you. Is this a CIA contract? She drummed her fingers on her leg as she thought over her response. Do you know the name Mikhail Sorkin? The Russian oligarch? With a nod, Angela said. An iron and steel magnate who fell out of President Peskov's favor, was imprisoned for 6 years on paper, then moved to London. She shrugged. Got out with his money, or I guess the money was already out, hidden in offshore banks. He's supposedly worth 16.3 billion US. What about him? He started a political movement called the New Russian Council. They're based in Poland. Zach had heard of the man and the movement. He said, trying to pass themselves off as a government in exile, except for the fact that nobody in Russia likes Mikhail Sorkin any more than they like President Peskov. She nodded. That's right. Anyway, the NRC hasn't changed its mandate. Sorkin is spending a lot of money training Ukrainians to fight against Russia and developing dissident Russian assets. Although what he plans on using the Russians for, we don't know. At the same time, he has said he would be willing to finance a small force of contract agents to move around Western Europe to try to track down Dvorak's cells and ideally, Dvorak himself. Sark took it all in. The CIA is asking me to go to Europe to work for a Russian oligarch. Lacey's face tightened again, and then she said, pretty much. Don't tell me this was your plan. I'm just the messenger. Initially, Sorkin came to us wanting ex-agency people to train his assets, but we presented this plan to Sorkin, and he agreed. You'll start in Czechia, but you might be hopping around a bit before you track Dvorak down. Don't expect to ever meet Sorkin or go to his HQ in Western Poland. You'll strictly be in the field. What's the agency's endgame in this? She shrugged. The New Russia Council is important. We hope they'll continue to grow and be a destabilizing force against the Kremlin. Lacey added, I've been asked to be your go-between with Langley, but we're operating through unofficial channels. No embassies, no cover for status. Meaning if I'm caught. Meaning if you or your people get caught, we disavow you. She added, try not to get caught. Zach half rolled his eyes. So glad I have your many years of experience in assassination to draw such helpful tips from. Do your job and then come back home. By home you mean here? She shook her head. DDO Watkins is prepared to let bygones be bygones when you are done with this arc. If you have completed it to his satisfaction, the DDO has said the order to hold you will be rescinded. We might have other odd jobs for an odd man like yourself, and we will give you a call. Zach nodded, then completely changed the subject. Have you heard from Six? She cocked her head. Six? What? Maybe you know him as Violator. No, Lacey nodded, because she'd expected this question. Violator was the code name of Court Gentry, Zach's old friend, and Lacey and Court had worked together in the past. She hadn't been certain Hightower would even know about this, but clearly he did. She nodded. He went dark a few months ago. I've even tried to reach him, without success. Why did he go dark? She hesitated a moment, then spoke softly. Did you know Anthem? Hightower's chest slowly deflated as he took in her words. Past tense. Moscow Station received intelligence that she was executed over the summer. He rubbed his eyes under his glasses, still absorbing the news. You told Violator about this. And then what? She leaned back again. Hanley told him, and he told Hanley that he was wrong. She paused. Then I tried to tell him, and he shot me down, said he didn't want to hear it. Angela said. Then he told me that I could not be associated with what he was going to do, because he was going to, and I quote, go on a reign of holy terror, to get into Russia to find her and get her out. Zach looked off into space, gave a slow nod. That sounds like our boy. So, he's still out there? I don't know. I hope so. Listen, Angela went on. I'm sure you're going to try to find out what you can about Court as soon as you're out of here. I'd be a fool to think otherwise, and I'd be just as big a fool to think that I could stop you. And I want you to remember your operation is with us. I know he's a friend of yours. He's a good man, Lacey said. I tried to help him, but I came up short. And now, as far as I know, he's on a one-man army, crusading for a lost cause. Zach sighed. It sounded like Court was fucked, and it didn't sound like there was much he could do for him. Lacey said, if you somehow do manage to talk to him, Tell him that I'm praying for him. And I'm praying for him to drop whatever scheme he has. Zoya is gone, and Court needs to take care of himself. Lacey added, if you want to help him, you will throw everything into your mission in Europe. Russia must be defeated. The regime has to change over there. She stood now.
Excuse me.
You willing? Zach followed her up. Yes, ma'am. I'll go to Chechnya and kill Carol Burnett for you. Lacey did not smile. It's Czechia, and it's Karol Dvorak. What did I say? Dave and 2 other GRS men will escort you to the airport. Escort? We don't want you hopping on a plane back to Texas. Hightower said, there's nothing for me in Texas. I'll go start hunting this GRU cell. When I've taken care of that, I'll see what else this Sorkin guy needs me to do. Lacey nodded. Good man. Zach said, hey, you want some cover? Made it myself. She looked at him quizzically, blindsided by the question. After a moment, she said, you have access to the kitchen. Ma'am, I have access to the liquor cabinet and the gun safe. Like you said, I'm chubby as fuck. She looked a little annoyed. I'm sure I did not say that. Peach? Cherry. Okay, I'll give you one last chance to visit with your fan club before we go. 5. Present day. CIA Deputy Chief of Station Matthew Henley looked out his window and took in his view of the ass end of the U.S. Embassy here in Bogota, Colombia. And not for the first time since arriving here 8 months ago, he wished he were somewhere else. He'd been somewhere else, just before Bogota. He'd served as the station chief at the embassy in Papua New Guinea, and he'd like that posting even less than this one. Colombia was fine, Hanley allowed, but previous to New Guinea, Hanley had been the DDO, the Deputy Director for Operations, head of all ops for the CIA. That meant that his job here, though better than New Guinea, was still a hell of a downgrade from the lofty position he'd lost just a year earlier.